As the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Houchin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. Thank you to Chairman Guthrie and Ranking Member Pallone. I'm speaking today in support of my bill, H.R. 5184, the Affordable Homes Act, which I introduced with Congressman Mike Flood. Across the country, the housing market continues to tighten, and families are feeling the impact. Manufactured housing is a proven, cost-effective solution serving first-time home buyers, young families, and seniors, yet Washington has created conflicting regulatory regimes that increase compliance costs and slow production. That's what the Affordable Homes Act aims to fix. It's straightforward and common sense. It restores HUD's long-standing role as the single regulator for manufactured housing construction standards and removes DOE's overlapping authority. The bill also reflects bipartisan collaboration. We adopted an amendment to allow DOE to retain an advisory role, ensuring agencies can share technical expertise without creating conflicting or unworkable requirements. The goal is clarity, not chaos, so manufacturers can build more homes and families can afford them. The bottom line is, when standards are clear, homes get built. The Affordable Homes Act delivers that clarity, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 5184, the Affordable Homes Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Americans know all too well that we're in the midst of a housing crisis. Not only are we facing a shortage of housing, but also historically high home prices that Americans are struggling to afford. Manufactured homes, however, are an important component of our affordable housing stock. And I appreciate my Republican colleagues' concern for the cost of buying a new home. The current housing affordability crisis and shortage is concerning, and it's crushing American families' dreams. However, H.R. 5184 is far from a real solution to solving this crisis. In fact, I'm concerned it will only make matters worse. The bill attempts to revoke the Department of Energy's May 2022 Energy Conservation Standard for manufactured housing. Supporters of this bill suggest that DOE's standards for manufactured homes are negatively impacting affordability, and I think nothing could be further from the truth. What's really impacting housing affordability is Trump's disastrous tariffs on essential building materials and appliances, not energy efficiency standards that lower monthly energy bills. In reality, the Department of Energy worked with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to balance upfront costs with long-term affordability, and to revoke the rule is just robbing families of significant and much-needed energy cost savings. When talking about affordability, it's imperative that we also consider the cost of actually living in these homes, and energy use is a big part of that. And this is even more important at a time when electricity costs are spiking across the country. The bill also removes DOE's authority to set efficiency standards for manufactured homes and shirks the responsibility to HUD. Not only does this give away energy and commerce jurisdiction, which always concerns me, but it also jeopardizes cost savings for millions of Americans. In the years that HUD was previously responsible for setting energy efficiency standards for manufactured homes prior to 2007, the agency failed to act. So it's no wonder that energy costs for manufactured homes are 70% more per square feet higher compared to site-built homes. So DOE's May 2022 standard was long overdue. Manufactured housing residents had gone without an updated standard for nearly 30 years before the Department of Energy final rule. Now, why should we trust HUD to safeguard manufactured housing residents from exorbitantly high energy bills now after so many years of inaction? While the bill was amended during the subcommittee markup to allow DOE to make efficiency recommendations to HUD on energy conservation standards, which HUD, I think, is likely to ignore, that amendment still failed to address the fatal flaws in the underlying bill. The bill still nullifies DOE's manufactured housing rule, jeopardizing billions in savings for families. And this is entirely unacceptable. We should be fighting to raise the standard of living of manufactured housing residents, not lowering it. So I still strongly oppose this bill, and I support making housing more affordable for Americans, but I don't think that H.R. 5184 is the solution, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Anyone else seeking recognition on the bill?
done a roll call. Oh, Jake wants to speak. Jake Walker.
Thank you. Mr. Auchincloss is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the majority and the Congresswoman from Indiana's willingness to work together on this issue and for supporting my amendment, which preserved the advisory role for the Department of Energy while giving HUD final authority to adopt standards for manufactured housing. That final authority and sole authority will create streamlined, clear regulations. And that's critical because housing is the single largest expense for American households, and decreasing housing costs is the most important domestic economic issue we face as a country. We need to build 5 million new units of housing this decade, and we are woefully behind. That's why I support this amended bill. Manufactured and modular housing promises to be a critical way to ensure housing supply at scale, at the same time as we are building out an industry that promises a lot of good jobs, but only if we remove the regulatory barriers to building manufactured housing at that scale. And streamlined regulations are a critical part of that. With the inclusion of my amendment, the bill will retain the Department of Energy's input on energy efficiency standards in an advisory capacity, as is appropriate for the department that has those experts on energy efficiency. So that means that DOE experts at the national labs will be able to provide input and research into creating those standards. Ultimately, though, HUD is going to have the final say in adopting the recommendations from DOE. That's appropriate because overall housing affordability takes precedent over just one component of affordability. HUD should be the agency that evaluates the overall impact on housing affordability for consumers. I'm absolutely in favor of ensuring that appliances and houses are efficient and saving money on total cost of ownership. There's a lot of factors that go into that total cost of ownership, construction and housing costs, as well as the overall energy usage. And HUD should be able to look at all of those factors holistically, taking an input from Department of Energy and making a determination that will save consumers the most money, including factoring in that expanded production of modular housing will save those consumers money. Boosting manufactured and modular housing is an opportunity to build our way out of our current housing crisis, and we should support common sense reform that will unleash housing production. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I would reserve the balance of my time, Chairman.
Well, you can yield it. I'm not sure you can reserve it.
I can't hold on to it in case someone said something else.
No, but I think that was a good effort. I like the ingenuity.
Will,
All right.
will the gentleman yield?
Then I'll yield it.
Will the gentleman, I was going to say, would the gentleman yield to me?
Yes. Can I
Gentleman yields.
grab it back?
Thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Auchincloss for working with us on this bill. I do think that the amendment made an improvement to the language that we had. I think it's going to be a good first step toward trying to get us into more housing around, which will ultimately reduce housing costs. So thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back to the gentleman. What would the gentleman like to do at this point?
I would yield to the gentleman from Ohio.
Can I?
Gentleman
Thank you,
from Ohio.
Mr. Chair. So I have a couple questions, or just two. The May 22nd standard question, which is, so obviously the goal here is to build more housing, less expensive housing, which I support, and having the clear standard makes sense. The DOE advisory role is very smart, so I want to thank both of you. I guess the concern that folks are going to have is on utility costs. So the May 22nd standard, which obviously plays a role in reducing ultimately the utility costs for those folks who then buy this manufactured home, is that in jeopardy? And if so, what are the ways in which we should tackle what would be a real challenge if people are going to have to start paying higher utility bills?
So the gentleman from Ohio is yielding back to the gentleman from Massachusetts, who
I
will
yield
now
back
yield
to-
to the gentlelady from Indiana to answer the question.
Thanks.
I'll yield to her first. Yeah, sure.
I was just going to say that my view, which is why one of the reasons why I brought the bill, is that when we're trying to get people in homes, Yes, do we want to get to energy efficiency standards? We do, but if they're adding to the cost of the ultimate purchase, then the consumer should be able to choose the price level at which they can get into the home. And that might be getting into the home as a priority over the necessary energy efficiency standards, which may be able to go back to a budgeting issue later in a household. So I'm trying to get people into homes. I think, not that we're not concerned about energy efficiency, but we certainly, in my view, need to prioritize getting the cost down, and this is a way to do that.
The gentlelady from Indiana yields back to the gentleman from Massachusetts, who now yields the remainder of his time to the gentleman from Ohio.
You yield back.
Back to Massachusetts, sorry.
Thank you. At the core of this bill is just a question of who decides, right? So Energy Department put out these standards, and HUD can adopt them if they want to. The question is, who makes the comprehensive decision about the total cost of ownership for these houses? And the status quo before was nobody, right? It was DOE and HUD debating it, and that created a very predictable bureaucratic confusion. What this bill does is it says HUD decides. Now, HUD, you have to go ask Department of Energy for their input, but ultimately, HUD, we trust you to take into account both energy efficiency issues, which matter for total cost of ownership, and the potential increase in cost of production and distribution, which also matters for total cost of ownership. And you, HUD, should balance that to lower overall costs for consumers. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Do we have anyone else seeking recognition on? Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
I just want to thank you both again. I do appreciate the intent here, and I'm on the fence, legitimately on the fence, and I appreciate the argument and the work. Clearly, standardizing the process here makes a lot of sense, and I know that the cost to build is a big part of why we have a housing crisis, and the cost of housing is so much higher than it should be. The utility cost piece does worry me. Obviously, I know it worries all of you. So I guess the question is not one to be answered in today, but what should we be doing to monitor, right, to make sure that this isn't leading to folks going into homes where they're then paying, much higher utility rates, and if there is a way in a bipartisan manner to work on helping folks, if that is the case, right? So we want people to be able to make that decision. I get that, and get into that home. I appreciate that.
Could I ask the gentleman to yield to me when he's
It's a real
finished?
debate now. Yeah, of course.
Okay. I just wanted you to know that the Department of Energy worked with HUD to set the 2022 Energy Conservation Standard for manufactured housing. And the standard is projected to save consumers $5 billion in costs, even when you include the upfront costs. Now, while there is a slight increase in the upfront purchase price of manufactured housing, that cost is spread over the life of the mortgage, and homeowners will immediately see energy savings on their monthly bills. So then benefits and energy savings to the consumer offsets the increase in the purchase price, in my opinion. So I didn't want you to think that that this wasn't a concerted effort to address affordability, both with the actual energy monthly bill as well as with the cost of the home when you buy it.
Yeah.
I yield back to
Would
the
the gentleman from Ohio yield?
One moment. I appreciate that. I do realize, though, that it does increase the cost, right? And so for some folks, maybe it priced them out of that home. I don't have any of this data in front of me, but I suspect that's probably true. I do think, assuming this passes, that one thing we should work on together is at least monitoring, figuring out how to track this, but appreciating that it probably will lead to folks having to pay more in utility costs, and what is it that we should be doing together to ease that burden, which I think we can do. I yield to, Mr. Chair, can I yield my?
Yields to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
I just reiterate, nothing stops HUD from adopting those standards, again, if they want to. This bill is not actually about any specific standard. It's about who decides and who is best positioned to take into account total cost of ownership. And when it's total cost of ownership for a house, I think the Department of Housing and Urban Development is best positioned to do that. Totally agree with you about the question of overall utilities costs. I think the biggest impact we're going to have, frankly, is on transmission and generation questions that we're working on in this committee as well. And so we don't want to try to boil the ocean in this one bill.
Fair enough. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else seeking recognition? Seeing none, we will now vote on HR 5184, and a recorded vote